Welcome. I'm Liz Taylor, ocean explorer, naturalist, and entrepreneur.
I'm Sylvia Earle, an oceanographer, explorer at the National Geographic, an ocean elder, and founder of Mission Blue. And so glad to be on board.
Always.
Yeah.
And this is our show, Dive In, where we host informal and open conversations with the ocean community on topics of wonder and interest.
Here we are.
And the most wonderful and interesting thing, as usual, is I'm going to try to share the screen, which is always a challenge.
But there we are.
But we manage it. And we've had some weird glitchy PowerPoint issues with this, so we're going to see what happens today. I think we're going to give it a shot here. Oh no. Okay. And before we get going, we want to remind everyone that
the world is blue. There you
go. Later on in the episode, you'll be able to put questions and answers into the Q&A box, and we'll get through as many as we can. And we may have time to take some raised hands as well today. And today we're being joined by our longtime friend and collaborator, Sally Ranney. So we're passing by the, look at you,
we're going to dive in.
Before we get to say, there she is, there's Sally. Sally, if you can turn on your microphone and video, that would be awesome. But Sally is co-founder and president of Global Choices. And like Sylvia, she's an IUCN patron of nature and a lifelong advocate for biodiversity and nature. She's worked for more than 30 years in public and private sectors on energy, climate change, and land use policies. And her work has been recognized with the Horace Albright Award and the International Conservation Award, among many others. Great to have you on board, Sally.
I am so delighted to be here. And this picture reminds me of our Arctic expedition, Sylvia, a few years ago, which was really an eye-opener, not just for me, but for so many people.
And here you are playing with the ice.
Yes, I've only been under the surface in the Arctic on one notable occasion or one expedition, but it's really cold. I mean, it is cold. With that expedition in 2008, where we were aboard the National Geographic Lindblad ship, where we had a very interesting collection of humans. The walruses were not terribly impressed.
They didn't look like they didn't even have any ice to haul out on either.
but the luminaries who were gathered were really individuals who took that experience and have taken it and used it really well in terms of policy for polar interests. And it was so great to have even President Jimmy Carter and Rosalind on board. And I have this picture of you in Atlanta with them years later. They were real champions, and so are you.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, he's been a delight to work with. And when the Alaska Lands National Interest Land Conservation Act, I worked with him on that. That was in the 70s. He signed it a few days before he was out of office in 1980, and that put 101 acres into conservation custody, including wild and scenic rivers, national parks, preserves, etc. It was probably, I think, the biggest single conservation action in the United States.
How large was it?
101 million acres.
Wow.
That's really impressive.
Yeah. And it took us many, many years. We started in 1971, I think it was, 5 of us over in a dark office at Audubon on a drawing table. We had all these maps and said, okay, now we got to look at boundaries. And it went from there.
Well, there was a time when we didn't have boundaries as such. And nature occupied most of the planet, natural systems. But we have really carved up most of the land, and now we're doing the same thing to the ocean in ways that I think this is the first time. I mean, like right now, 21st century, we're beginning to understand that we've got to give back, that the natural systems keep us alive, and now we have to do the same for nature.
Well, as Sally pointed out, that we really are an ice-dependent planet in many ways, and it seems to be in very sharp retreat on our watch.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. We're actually all ice-dependent species. Humanity is, but we don't recognize that because, the Arctic is up there, the Antarctic is down there, and it doesn't feel to most people or look to most people that it is affecting us. But Earth systems, of which the Arctic is a primary one, and the Arctic sea ice particularly because of the reflective ice shield and keeping the sun's heat and radiation, keeping us cool. It's a thermostat, if you will. It's a global climate regulator. Most people don't recognize the whole system. And so that has been the nemesis, actually, of humanity in relating to and dealing with and making decisions about nature.
Well,
Yeah.
and how the cold water sinks and travels deep within the ocean, and you can be in the warmest parts of the planet, right on the equator, and you dive down, and it gets cooler as you go deeper until when you get to the bottom, it's like being in the Arctic or in the Antarctic, because the water temperature, cold water sinks and travels widely in upwells in various places. It's the combination of the atmosphere, the ice, of course, the ocean, all together that really make Earth habitable, with the fact that it's alive. It's not
Indeed.
just rocks and water and ice, it's a living system.
Incredible amount of species in the Arctic, something like 21,000 species in the Arctic ecosystem. And, it's similar to what people used to think about the desert before science really emerged on how rich the biodiversity is in the desert. It's the same with the Arctic. It's amazing. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And in penguin territory on the other end of the planet.
Yeah. So, well, I really appreciate being invited to have this conversation with you today. And I think it's becoming really clear that what's happening to the polar ice is really going to be our future. And I will get into that in just a moment. And our future, just what we were talking about, is indivisible. Nothing is separate from anything else. And we humans are one humanity as well. And everything is connected to everything. So we can't really separate out and make decisions separate from recognizing the whole. So the Arctic, we are Global Choices, as this says, is an all-female led nonprofit U.S. organization, and we're really looking at the ice crisis, the whole cryosphere, all the ice and snow, frozen waters, frozen ocean is called the cryosphere, the Himalayas, the glaciers, etc., the third pole. All of it is the cryosphere. And we're focused specifically on the Arctic and the Arctic Ocean, the Central Arctic Ocean. And the reason being is that it's a global commons. It belongs to it belongs to all of us. And as a high seas was recognized in the UN law of the sea, that it does belong to the heritage of humanity. So extinction really is on the table here for the ice on this planet, which keeps us cool. And the interesting thing about the Central Arctic Ocean, you can see on this map that that yellow line is where the ice used to be, and where the ice is now in the summer. This is in 2020, has really retreated. And each year it retreats more and more. It expands, yes, as winter comes on, but it doesn't expand where it was in the beginning. NASA has been tracking this since 1979. So we can actually see in real time what has happened to the ice. And the reason is that CO2 emissions and the global warming, heating up of the air temperature and water temperature is the culprit. The interesting thing is that now the Arctic is both a victim of climate change, of CO2 and emissions, but it's also a driver now of climate change. It's right on the edge of being both. So one of the things that is happening is permafrost thaw and coastal erosion is one of the impacts of this, because what happens as the ice melts, instead of reflecting the sun's heat and radiation, it now is absorbed by a dark ocean because it's not being reflected anymore. And this changes air and water temperature, and permafrost, of which almost 2/3 of Russia is permafrost. And Alaska and Canada, all of these countries in the Arctic Council have a good portion of permafrost. And the permafrost holds methane gases, which when it thaws, go into the atmosphere. And they've also found out, this is remarkable, that some of the aerosols that we have put into the atmosphere in the past got refrozen in permafrost and now is emitting. And so
a shocking situation with the permafrost, because it's not just, it's like that frozen, what we always called permafrost, because it never did thaw, even in the middle of summer, it was still very frozen, and it's just full of microbes and decayed material, so that now as it's thawing, we're also seeing that acceleration of the methane because you're getting decomposition of some of those materials. And the release of microbes and viruses and things that have been kind of like sequestered and hidden away in the permafrost. And you saw it kind of firsthand up in Alaska that when you went there with the film crew, with the Nixons, and saw that whole village that was sort of now,
where the houses are actually collapsing into the sea.
Yeah.
Used to be held intact by the sea ice, but because it melts sooner and freezes later, so there's more dark water, as you point out, and the dark water absorbs the light, the heat.
Yeah, exactly. And so just this last week, the Arctic temperatures were 30 degrees Celsius.
Incredible.
And the Arctic, the loss of the Arctic sea ice now is being linked to so many of the climate change impacts that we're seeing around the world. So one of the things that is happening is the food web is being disturbed. And this graphic, is pretty clear about how this works. But the Arctic cod, which survives on the underside of the ice, both with what they're eating in phytoplankton and algae, etc., but also they lay their eggs on the bottom side of the ice. And as the ice retreats, this is a major fishery. And as the ice retreats, well, we're going to have a loss of that species. And then, you get into the narwhals and the polar bears and the lack of sea ice and hunting. And it's it's the animals as well as the indigenous people who have their whole system of hunting and subsistence is being shifted because they can't rely on the ice the way they did.
Yeah, it's a whole part of their heritage.
There's not much latitude for people who live outside of the region to be dining on Arctic cod.
I mean, yeah, nobody needs
Yes.
to do
Or
that.
krill or anything else. I mean, for those who have a long history and have worked in harmony with nature for very long periods of time, I think their needs and their habits, especially their needs, should be respected.
Absolutely.
But there's zero justification for a large-scale commercial extraction, industrial extraction of the wildlife to
Yeah.
ship to other parts of the planet. The system can't take it. There's nothing in the history of these creatures that has prepared for large-scale predation by a terrestrial primate that would be us. And they're not necessary for food security. It's a food choice for us to be taking them at all. Unlike, again, those people who have developed a long history and do work in harmony, even there, you can overstretch the system because the system was there before there were humans. We think 10,000 years is a long time, which is about the length of time that humans have persisted in the Arctic region, maybe somewhat longer, but none as long as whales and bears and Arctic cod and krill. The system, we've come in as newcomers.
Well, and to your point, I've heard both you and Sally comment that, there is no excess in nature. So it's not that there's excess krill for us to take or excess fish or anything of this sort. It's all there for a reason. And it's pretty well utilized by the animals that have evolved to rely on them, on each other.
It's taken a long time to get things so that the planet works in a way that's favorable to us. And it's taken us a really short time.
Right. And that's in balance, that was in balance. And we have really upset that balance. And hopefully we can recreate that balance. That's the hope. And that means that a lot of people have to wake up, and that gets into a much longer discussion about our economic system. We need an economic system that supports life, not degrades life. And we have to really embrace the fact that these are our life support systems.
Absolutely.
Not just for humans, but it's the life support system of this planet. And we're messing with the instrument panel, if you will, in a way that cannot be, it's not sustainable, and it's going to go fast if we don't get on it.
Well, that's part of the thing is that, you take an animal like these walrus or any of those other critters that we looked at in the last slide, and animals are adaptable. They can adapt to change and so forth, but it's really the speed of the change.
Yeah.
They just have the time to go through, the many generations it might take them to learn, how to eat something different, where to lay their eggs in a different setting, how do they adapt and survive over time. That takes, many, many, many generations. But the speed of change is so fast, and the temperature increases are so dramatic that they're having a very tough time coping. And you had stories of these walrus of some people have been on research vessels and witness the walrus, the young polar bears just drowning because they have no sea ice to haul out on, and the parents just have to abandon them. And it's gutting. The people are fundamentally changed, and they go out and witness this kind of stuff. But to your point, we're kind of detached from these polar regions in many ways, and so it's hard to grip the significance of the change and the speed of the change.
Yeah, exactly. And we work with some citizen scientists, 2 women that have something called Hearts in the Ice, and they overwintered in the middle, literally, of nowhere in Svalbard, and they were witnessing polar bears eating kelp because they had nothing else to eat. I mean, it just broke my heart. And reindeer also eating kelp, but they do that on occasion. But to hear of polar bears resorting to that.
Yeah.
It's
starving.
Yeah, they're starving. It's heartbreaking. Yeah. So hopefully, one of the things that we're looking at is how do we raise the bar and the visibility on what's happening to our albedo effect, which is, as I said, a global climate regulator, a thermostat that is unraveling on our watch. And so what we wanted to do was bring home really the fact that without this ice shield, the majority of which is retreating into the Central Arctic Ocean, as well as north of Greenland, and is now there's a lot of scientific evidence that has come out of Potsdam Institute and other institutes that loss of the Arctic and the Arctic sea ice is a trigger for other tipping points on the planet. And so we've got this heat wave that has hit Pakistan. And the next slide shows, the flooding that's now linked to floods that are taking place, severe droughts, the heat dome that literally boiled the tidal zone along the Pacific Northwest is now linked to the loss of the albedo, because that's what is when we have these oscillations in the jet stream, which is also related to the loss of sea ice. And fires. There was a report that came out on the fires in California related to the loss of sea ice.
Yeah, and it's so difficult for people to understand how those things all lashed up together.
But this is, it may be difficult, but think how it was 100 years ago, literally, except for a few visionaries, impossible for people to visualize. We don't have an excuse anymore. We've got the evidence. We've got views from high in the sky. We've got people measuring the connections on the ground. Mm-hmm. It's not a mystery. You can see how, as you point out, everything connects. So fires on one part of the planet really affect the whole planet.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, then, it's a local and a global situation, and the indigenous cultures of the Arctic are really starting to suffer. And it's a little bit of a mystery to me why the Arctic Council, which is 8 countries now, minus Russia for the time being, if you will, why they did not raise their hands to the international community and say, hey, look what's happening here. It's happening locally, and look at these impacts of what's happening here now on you in Northern Africa, in the United States, in the Caribbean, and it goes on and on. Even there was, I saw an article recently that, not recently, maybe 8 months ago, that less moisture in the Amazon, minus the deforestation, put that aside for a moment, is due to the loss of sea ice. So it is an epicenter of climate change right now. And we have to step up to the plate. Now, this came out of Potsdam, and this shows you, these are other tipping points that are listed below. And it's hard to see, but if you look at the arrows, okay, if you look at the Arctic sea ice, which is B, those arrows are all coming out of the Arctic sea ice to these other tipping points. And so our mission is, okay, so how do we get the global community to really embrace this, to really understand this? Because as you said, Sylvia, we have the evidence. We know now what we know. And if you go to the next slide, there is, it affects just what you said. It affects the ocean currents. And if you go to the next slide, this is what's happening to the jet stream because of the loss of ice. And so the polar vortex is disrupted. And when you get these big troughs, that warm air is what creates the heat domes and the droughts, etc. And then when you get the deep oscillations, Texas freezes. So it's
believe it, right? When Texas freezes.
Yeah, it's
Who ever thought? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we cannot ignore this anymore unless we just want to witness our own demise, and that of all the species that we're taking with us because of our ignorance or lack of wisdom, and not taking the right action. So this is shows you exactly what I was saying, how that works with the polar vortex now disrupted. And the next slide is okay.
What can we do?
Yeah, so what we're doing is we're calling for a 10-year moratorium on any activity that disturbs the existing fragile sea ice, particularly, and this is a hope spot that Sylvia recognized years ago. We're latecomers here, but we're with you. We're with you 110%. I got to tell you that. But it's because it's a global commons, it doesn't belong to anybody yet. Although
maybe the whales.
To the whales.
Yeah, well, exactly. I'm talking humans, countries.
Right. Yeah.
We have
So,
but
yes, we do.
right. And that's where most of the ice shield is. And what we're also calling for, and that's immediate. And I want to say that we're looking at a hybrid framework, if you will. We can't go through the UN because by the time they make a decision, the ice will be gone. So we're looking at templates like the International Fishing moratorium that was passed, that was ratified by, I think it was 13 countries ratified that, a 16-year moratorium on fishing. There also is, as you know, both of you know quite well, is the proposed moratorium on deep seabed mining. So
Yeah.
yeah. So we're looking at different approaches to protecting this area, along with gaining endorsement by countries that see the value of protecting this because it's in their own self-interest. So this map shows the Central Arctic Ocean and the ice shield, and what we're proposing the moratorium on for 10 years, just 10 years, because nobody would sign on for anything longer than that.
Yeah, unfortunately.
Yeah, unfortunately, is that would put a pause on hydrocarbon exploitation, deep seabed mining, of which this map shows. If you see that little inset there, that the Geckel Ridge, there's a couple places where there are these nodules, with quote unquote rare earth minerals. And there has been scientific exploration to find out exactly where those are located. No transpolar shipping route across the North Pole. No radioactive waste dumping, no seismic testing, and no nuclear weapon testing. Now,
weapon testing all, hopefully.
None of this we should be doing anyway, right? None of it. And
well, the really interesting thing about looking at the shipping issue is that, I think people can kind of visualize it if they in the summertime, if they get the big block of ice, it melts a lot slower than the bag of crushed ice, right? Mm-hmm. And when these ships go through the enormous propellers, you're not only introducing noise, but that churning, it actually makes these kind of oscillations that actively break up the the ice and make it kind of accelerate the melting.
That's right.
It's one of these things that we don't really think about. It's trying to get there more economically, take the shortest route, this sort of thing.
Yeah,
and carve up your life support system.
Yeah, and cover up the life support system. It's kind of like you eat the big plate of loaded fries today, but you don't think about the thrombus that's coming 20 years later, right?
Exactly.
But yeah, the earth's throw a clot here, this is not good,
Yeah. Well, and you said something, Sylvia. I think maybe it was on one of the Harassus panels that we were on together. You said the burden of proof has to be shifted. It's on us, citizens, who are trying to protect our planet, and it should be on governments who are supposed to protect their citizens, and particularly next generations. And we're the ones that have to, we bear the burden of proof to try to protect our life support systems. And it's completely upside down. And I so appreciated that comment from you, because I haven't heard anybody else say that except for me. Now I quote you. So this brings a focus that nobody else has provided, and a doable action, which gives a 10-year pause for science to catch up. And because the ice, if we really get on deep emission cuts as we need to now, the ice responds more linearly to more or less CO2 than other systems. So we can track this in real time. This is a metric to which we can hold global leaders accountable. for their decisions. And,
I- Yeah,
I mean, to really take stock how much of the natural world remains in the 21st century as compared to the beginning of the 20th century. Consider how much of the world humans have spread our impact in just 100 years.
how much
Yeah.
more pavement?
And it's on the land, but it also stretches into the sea. John Kerry has recently kind of summed up the connection that to solve the climate crisis, it's necessary to solve the ocean crisis and vice versa. They're so closely connected. And the Arctic is mostly ocean as compared to Antarctica, which is, of course, a continent surrounded by a frozen ocean, at least partially frozen right around the continent. So the idea that how much can we get away with and still have a planet that functions in our favor? Earth has supported life without us for most of its history. And for most of its history, Earth was not really suitable for us. I mean, go back 1 billion years. It's only, it's Earth has been building for at least 4.5 billion years. If we could not exist, not enough oxygen in the atmosphere, life would be mostly microbial. No elephants, no trees, no birds, no whales, none of the things that we kind of take for granted today. And we have consumed so much over our history, but never more than as our numbers reached, well, by 1980, we're at 4 billion, and we've doubled since then.
Seems incredible.
I mean, go back to
Frantic pace.
1800, it was 1 billion. Go back 500 years when great explorers were, for the first time, well, except for the Polynesian sailors, they were exploring 1,000 years ago or more,
Exactly,
but
yeah.
population has really gone up at such a rapid pace. And at the same time that we have apparently been successful and prosperous, nature has borne the cost. So now we're looking at forests that have been converted to human purposes. The ocean, 90% of the sharks, swordfish, cod, you name it. If we like to eat it, their numbers are at historic lows. Typically around 90% already gone. And half the coral reefs, kelp forests, seagrass meadows, those systems that govern the carbon cycle, generate oxygen, capture, and transmit the various elements that make life possible.
For us.
Yeah, well, for all
For
sorts of things.
biodiversity as we know it.
And we didn't know this, it would be a real problem, but we do know, which is cause for hope, and why what you are doing with the organization that you've created with some pretty powerful women who are not going to be silenced, we're going to really take action. It's not enough to know, it's not enough to care. You have to do something.
That's right.
And something is to embrace as much of the natural, healthy planet as possible and keep it safe and restore what we can of places that have been disturbed. So carving up the Arctic seems like a no-go zone.
Well, it's
Just don't do it.
yeah, it's such a nice way that you phrased it as, kind of causing it a peace pause, right? And Sylvia says all the time, we need to make peace with nature to restore these natural systems while we still can. And it makes all the sense in the world, but it just seems like it could be a political nightmare in the Arctic, even more so than the Antarctic and across the high seas. But, we know it has to happen. You have to find the ways to do it.
People have to recognize why it's not just about saving polar bears, although they're right on the edge, or walruses, or the Ranney, the rest of life.
Cod.
It is about that. but mostly if they can't survive, we can't either.
That's right. That's exactly right. And the second piece of this work is, well, there's actually it's a four-pronged strategy, if you will. We are one of the pieces that we're pursuing right now is there have not been climate models that correlate how fast the sea ice is melting in relationship to what the acceleration has to be with carbon reduction, emissions reductions, but also in decarbonization of economies, investment in renewable energy. We need 1 trillion gigawatts of renewables over the next 10 years, to get us where we need to be. Nobody's put all of that together in a climate model yet. I am pursuing it now. We are pursuing that because of what I said before. This is a metric to which we can hold global leaders accountable because it's so visible from 1979 to now. If we don't make the right decisions, the ice is going to show us. Now we know we're going to do an overshoot, in 2 something degrees Celsius. If we honor all the commitments and we accelerate, we'll overshoot. But once that is plateaued, the vision is that we can get to 1.5 and hold there. The IPCC said in the 2021 report, the 6th assessment in AR6, that if we hold at 1.5, the Arctic sea ice can restore naturally in decades. They didn't say how many decades. They said it could be done. Now, I work on the positive like you do, Sylvia and Liz. And so that to me is enough to go as far as we have to go to make that happen. So, the conclusion is that we really do have to make better global choices as a global community. And we have to start making decisions through the whole system's lens, because if we don't, it's not going to work. It's just going to work.
We do know what to do in terms of our own human actions, about carbon emissions, but whatever it is, that has to be coupled with taking the pressure off of the natural systems. And that means look at the industrial extraction of ocean wildlife.
Mm-hmm.
It means looking at shipping with new eyes, new understanding that we hadn't thought about the disruptive nature of our actions with so many things. It's just use technology. If we can build it or do it or go there, we just haven't looked at the consequences until now. Mm-hmm. We see that the noise created by shipping, the disturbance, the translocation of all kinds of creatures from one place to another,
The invasive
mm-hmm.
species. But we're not going to stop shipping, but we can do it better. And we can be mindful of the impacts. And we need to do everything we can to safeguard those natural systems that are still in good condition. Why would anyone consider bringing up the deep sea, either for mining minerals or for mining life? Yeah. There are companies in a handful of countries that are investing large sums in equipment to drag the life out of the ocean on an industrial scale. That's the carbon cycle. I want to say it's the carbon cycle, stupid. Like, leave it alone. Because no matter what we do governing our behavior, we have to save the natural systems that have gotten us to a safe place to begin with.
Yeah.
That's what to be repaired, and to the extent that the system is still working, don't disrupt it any further and try to heal the harm we've already imposed.
Yeah.
It's like,
I know, it's shocking. And we've seen the damage that, that like trawling has done
yeah.
to the ocean, but we can make that correlation. And, just through photographs we have of trawled versus untrawled areas. And then you think about what that would do to a much more delicate system like the deep sea that is tens of thousands of years for these nodules to form.
I think millions.
Yeah. They form around like a fossil shark tooth, like really old stuff.
Yeah.
We know enough to know better.
So Sylvia, I have a question for you.
Oh, good. I'm going to go to the questions too and see what other questions are popping in here with.
I mean, you have been involved with this so long, and here we are on the cusp of having just a sliver of time left on the carbon clock, basically on the climate clock, to make a measurable difference with regard to the trajectory that we're on. And what do you think has to happen in order to leap over the resistance, the not going fast enough, not accelerating on nature-based solution investments and all the rest that we know about? What really has to happen?
I think what you're doing, Sally, we got to inform people of all stripes and sizes and shapes and wherever they are, from those who have influence as heads of state, heads of corporation, and we have to get the kids, the teachers, the moms, the dads, everywhere. We didn't know that we are in a race. And now we know we are basically running for our lives without even recognizing that that's what's happening. We must get from the edge of the cliff to a turning point, and we can do it. This should be the most exciting, thrilling time in all of history.
Yeah,
because we know what to do.
We know what to do. There's so much that can be done just on the community, local level that can be helpful. And
personal choices. Times a million.
Global choices.
Or billion.
Exactly. Global choices and personal choices. Well, and also I think women are key. Absolutely key. And we are an all-woman organization by design, not by default. And we have now, I think, 52 Arctic Angels, which are young women. I think we're now in 31 countries, 30 or 31 countries, who are high octane young women who will be, and they're global leaders now, but they will be the female leadership for climate in the future. And it's an amazing group of young women, and they are completely, totally dedicated, and they get how important the Arctic sea ice is. So they're taking this story from the Philippines to to Ecuador, to New Zealand, to Europe, to South America. I mean, we're everywhere almost. And we'll be, we're growing. It's growing. And the other thing that we're about to launch is an Arctic Legal Defense Fund, which will look at legal frameworks that I was explaining earlier. We're not going out and litigating at this point in time, But how do the rights of nature and ecocide and some of these other legal frameworks, how do we incorporate those into protecting a high seas area like
Exactly.
the Central Arctic Ocean?
That is one approach. It's respect for our neighbors, if you will, all the rest of life on Earth.
Mhm.
But even if you're thinking very selfishly just about the future of humankind,
Mhm.
it's essential that we take care of the systems that make our existence possible.
Yeah.
And we can make an economic argument that we have to protect and not completely stay on track to consume beyond the capacity of systems to recover.
Mhm.
So economically, it doesn't make sense, especially when we subsidize the destruction of nature.
The worst.
We subsidize the mining industry, the oil and gas industry, the fishing industry. Our taxpayer money through government distribution of funds, and that's just my money, your money, around the world, government with funds that are derived from the citizens are being used
Mhm.
to essentially consume nature. And we thought once upon a time, that's what we should do. That was the mandate.
That was the economic driver.
But yeah, as if we will
Yeah.
never run out of fish, we'll never run out of land or trees or anything else. But
Yeah.
now we know economically it doesn't make sense. Nature
Mhm.
is not just free goods. The other is ecologically, it doesn't make sense because we can see the world coming apart and trends that are new on our watch in my
Yeah.
lifetime, yours, the lifetime of even 10-year-old kids are seeing the changes.
Yeah, we've
But
seen
the
that.
third thing may be the most important thing, and it's what you just referred to, Sally, and it's kind of the moral the responsibility, the ethic. What right do we have as humans to take everything, to kill the last tuna, to have oversight of the destruction, the loss of Arctic ice, or to be witnessing as we are, to be the causative agents and letting it happen? I think
Mhm.
morally it's wrong. We're closing the door and not giving those coming along. Today's children do not have the same options, the same choices that I had when I was a kid.
Mhm.
And doors were already closed to me that my parents had that are closed because, for example, passenger pigeons gone
Yeah.
by the time I came along. What are
Mhm.
passenger pigeons good for? Well, that's a typical human question.
Yeah,
If we can't sell it
eat
or
it.
eat it, or turn it into
It's
a
not
product,
slow and tasty.
you know,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
considered worth, who cares? But now we know that we have not been able to understand the connections, the value of things beyond a saleable or edible value, that
Mhm.
life should be the most important value of all. And we depend on these systems that we had nothing to do with creating. Our
Exactly.
habit being to destroy them or to use them. And so like a river, a wild river, is it by itself? You say, well, what good is it? How can it's underutilized if we don't put a dam there and use it
Yeah.
in some, for energy or irrigation or recreation or something,
Lawns.
instead of saying, maybe it was doing pretty well just as a river.
Yeah.
And that we were benefiting, maybe the greatest benefits were derived from just leaving it alone.
Just free flowing. I mean, that's one of the reasons in 1968 that the Wild and Scenic River System was was put into place because of that very reason, as free flowing rivers have a value. And that was not recognized until, and it was a counterpart to the Wilderness Act, which was passed in 1964. And the same characters were involved in both of those. And so the counterbalance, one of the things that our co-founder Inga Relf says is we can't plant ice. And isn't that great? And it really is, it gets people to start thinking about the fact that we cannot make a tree. We cannot make a fish. We cannot create what nature has created.
Yeah, we know how to kill it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
And so there's an arrogance that is at somewhat, I think, of a cause for all this. There's an arrogance about humanity being on the pinnacle of creation, which we are not. We are absolutely not. We are part of it all. And, there's also, I guess you'd call it ocean blindness. The ocean has not, and there's ice blindness, has not been seen or recognized until very, very recently. And still not to the point where decisions are made in favor of the oceans and the ice. So there's a big play here as far as will humanity really step up in time? Will our decision makers really step up in time
And
to do what needs to be done?
Well, guess who puts them in place? We who vote.
Yes.
Right.
Well, we're running a bit short on time, and I think we need to pop into some of the questions that we have.
Oh boy.
Okay. Victoria is asking, as of May 2022, the designation of critical habitat for the bearded seals and ringed seal has been announced, which is great news, but bolder action is still needed as temperatures are rising. Are you aware of more plans for this same cause of habitat protection for seals, bearded and ringed seals?
Well, I think the 30 by 30 is on the broad scale. The idea that nations are stepping up to embrace natural systems, land and sea, from polar regions to the equatorial zones, and it does all matter. The more we can safeguard the systems that are still working, better off we'll be. The likelihood is greater that we'll win the race. That we have to work with nature, and this action to protect two species of seals is really admirable. It's a small thing, but every small thing adds up.
The other thing is that when we protect, kind of keystone species like that, they have certain needs. They need ice.
And all the microbes they need to protect a lion. You have to protect
the whole savanna,
the system.
Yeah, the whole system. So when you protect those two really cool and iconic seal species, you protect a lot of other critters in the mix as well.
Yeah.
So it's really good when you have an overarching, or you can, somebody can hang on to an animal. Maybe it's a polar bear, walrus, or these seals, but when you protect those animals and sort of the systems that they need to exist, and if they have like areas that connect to one another, kind of like your, wildlife corridors on the land, maybe there's some sea ice corridors that they require.
It'd be great if Canada would stop killing seals outright. Hundreds
Well,
of thousands.
Yes, yeah, that is so barbaric and antiquated.
It's not,
it's just not.
It's not a matter of need at all.
All right.
No.
So April is asking, will the Supreme Court's ruling to limit the EPA's ability to regulate emissions accelerate global warming and climate change? The second part of the question, as an ocean activist, it was devastating to hear the news. How do you keep your motivation to continue fighting for the planet?
Yeah, what keeps you going, Sally?
What keeps us all going?
It's interesting. When I was a child, I announced I was not going to church or to Sunday school, but I was spending my time with a tree. And my mother let me do that. And so I took my naps inside of a huge old tree that it was a her. I have no idea how I knew that, but I knew that. I was 6, 7 years old, and she had a cavity at her base that was just big enough for me to crawl in and take my naps. And I learned more from that tree than I have from 17, 18 years of, education. And once you have that kind of an experience, and you know in every cell in your body that everything is one, there is no separation, that the greatest illusion, existential risk, is the illusion of being separate from each other and from nature. And so once, so my course was set when I was 7, and I had no choice. And I love nature so much, and sustains me that, I couldn't do anything else with my life, really, and be happy. Couldn't do it. And you, Sylvia?
So it was
Once you know, you can't
that wave.
unknow.
That's it.
And, spending time just looking at the miracle that life exists at all.
Mhm.
I think it was a big wake up for a lot of humans when Earth was first witnessed from high in the sky, to see it's a little blue miracle. It's alive.
Mhm.
No matter where else you look, there might be life somewhere else in the universe, but nowhere else are there whales or elephants or big old trees that you could crawl into to take a nap. I mean, not Mars, not Jupiter, not anywhere. It's all
Mhm.
here. We need to take care of our home instead of just, you wouldn't do to your home, your house, what we do to nature. You wouldn't just, tear down the walls. You respect what keeps you alive.
Mhm.
And now that it should be obvious to everyone that we need intact systems. We need coral reefs. We need old growth forests that are unlike planted tree farms.
Mhm.
Which have a value, but they're nothing like an old growth system. All the pieces are intact.
It's
Mhm.
fundamentally different.
Yeah, agriculture feeds us, but there are other ways to feed ourselves with smarter agriculture that isn't quite so devastating and just a sense trying to conquer nature. Nature wins in the end every time.
Absolutely.
COVID-19 should have taught us that if we hadn't already learned it.
Yeah. And I think, this whole Supreme Court ruling on the EPA, it's just another example of like the top up failure, and we really need that sort of that growth from below, for the kids, and every choice, every global choice that we make. We don't have to put up with it. We just can just getting on, making our individual choices and kind of leading by example, getting others in your
Mhm.
fold, community, in your city, to your state, and just, keep that positive change going.
Mhm. And those who live in a democracy, uh, and do have the right to vote, really need to step up in a way that perhaps haven't in the past. It's amazing to me that there hasn't been more outrage for some of the things that have happened, not just in the United States, but in other countries. And why are we not, just in the streets all the time?
Exactly. It just,
Other ways
yeah.
to affect positive change, but whatever it takes. I think the underlying response to the question about the laws that are now
Mm,
being changed, not in favor, the effect will be not in favor of taking care of the systems that make our existence possible. We have other choices, but mainly we have to look at the laws that we have. They're put there for reasons that seem like good ideas at the time. Some
mhm.
basic laws, thou shalt not kill, that's kind of basic. I mean, killing one another,
Yeah.
but there aren't laws about necessarily directed thou shalt not kill nature. We're killing nature.
Yeah.
We need to think differently and show some common sense.
Exactly.
You got
So
two more
much of this is common
questions.
sense. So much of this is common sense, you
It really
know,
is.
and the science is just confirming common sense.
Yeah, that's right.
It's really interesting, you
We're
know,
not making
how this is working.
some of the laws on our books were made at a time when the world was a different place.
That's
Yeah.
absolutely the case.
Like fishing laws, like mining laws, like use of whatever it is, either the laws that were put in place or the fact that laws were not put in place when we thought the world behaved in a certain way and we could get away with restructuring rivers at our will, at putting whatever we wanted to in the sky, or developing materials such as the plastic materials that don't go away, or not looking at the lifetime of the many things that we have created that are just now stacking up and clogging our ability to function.
Mhm.
So maybe we need to create new laws that address the reality of today and get rid of some old ones because they were made when the world was a different place.
Mhm.
When we thought one thing, now we know based on evidence that
They're not applicable anymore.
yeah, we
Yeah.
now have a billion people, not 1 billion.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And we have to rethink how we treat one another. I mean, there was a time, obviously not so long ago, that and it's still happening, that humans use other humans as slaves. We
Yeah.
treat nature as products. I mean, come on. We have the gift of knowing, and we do have a bit of time, not a lot, to kind of get our act together. It's the
Mhm.
first time that the best time, I think this is the most exciting and cause a time when we should be thrilled. We have the power of knowledge. We
Mhm.
just have to use it.
Yeah.
Yes, indeed. Okay.
You have
Lyra,
one final
two.
question?
Two.
Okay.
Well, one's kind of a statement, the other is a question. So what is the statement first? So Lyra says it's not a question, but I'm just saying we need more ocean literacy in schools now so that kids can understand and relate to the needs of the planet. Earth provides enough to satisfy every man's need, but not every man's greed,
Mhm.
like Gandhi said.
Hmm.
So that really does fold into exactly what you're both saying. And our
Mhm.
final question, what would we, this is from Martin, what would we need to do to grow ice for the balance of the ecosystem? What do we need to do to grow that, to help grow that so we can see some tangible positive change on the ice shield?
Right, right. Well, I think one is to get global leaders to endorse this moratorium based on the fact that if we keep the ice that exists from being chopped up and accelerate the melting, number one, that will really help a lot. Number two is that can be a driver for deeper emission cuts, more investment in nature-based solutions, and use it as a metric. geoengineering always comes to mind when you say, how do you build the ice? Well, if we don't get to 1.5, if we don't get to the cause of what is diminishing the cryosphere in the first place, it's not going to make any difference what geoengineering is going to do. And we still do not know what the unintended consequences are. We do know that if we change our behavior, and if we do get deep, deep emission cuts now, COP27 in Egypt in November is going to be a real key for pushing for accelerated commitments. And then, it's up to global citizens to keep countries on target. There has to be an accountability loop. And at this moment, there isn't one that, well, there is and there isn't, and that's a longer discussion, but we have to stay on it. I'm sure that, there will be deeper discussion in the future about various, cloud brightening and other proposals out there. But if we do the right thing and we do it in time, nature can heal. Nature can heal.
And that's
it.
so.
Give nature a break.
Give nature a break. Every
Give
choice you
ourselves-
make every day, think
Yeah.
about it and try to choose the least harmful path, or
Yeah.
hopefully the beneficial
I
path.
appreciate the question. I really appreciate the question.
But
Yeah.
we are a little past the top of the hour today. We went a little bit over, but those are great questions and great discussion. But we do have to wrap it up. And before we close today, Sylvia and I would like to say thank you. Thank you, Sally. Thank you to the Ocean Elders for hosting us, producing the show, and
Yes.
to everyone in the drive-in community. You just keep showing up and participating in these discussions, and we're so grateful. Dive-in
Spread the
feels
word.
it feels like home to us, and we hope it feels like home to you as well. Water and ice, they connect us all.
Yeah.
So we'll see you next time. But until then, take care of the ocean and the ice,
Mhm.
As if your life depends on it. Why?
because it does.
Thank you
you,
so
Sally.
much, you two. Thank you so much for everything
All
that you
right.
Thank you.
We'll see you next time, everyone. Thank you.